Hello and welcome to this latest episode of Linda Wright Planning Pundit. As you will have seen from the front screen, this one is all about pubs, and it started the week commencing 16th of January. So welcome. Thank you for logging on. We'll do the like, share and subscribe thing at the end. So what do I want to talk to you today about pubs? Well, in the use classes order, pubs are called public houses and drinking establishments. That means wine bars and any kind of place where drinks, alcoholic usually, are sold. As you will recall in the use classes order, and I will do an episode on the use classes order because it changed quite radically about 18 months ago, and it hadn't really changed for over 30 years. So the use classes order now, there used to be a classification for public houses that was class A4. This class A4 has now been sort of thrown into the general play box, if you like, of sui generis. Sui generis means of its own kind. So basically means the planning legislation didn't know where to put the classification of public houses because they're seen arguably as bad neighbour developments. They're not necessarily, but that's where they've been placed for planning legislation purposes. So a public house, a wine bar, whatever type of use it is, a cocktail bar, any kind of, might have be a music venue at the same time. So a public house, it used to be class A4, as I've said. It is now falling within the sui generis class in the use classes order. So that means that anything that you do with a public house, and I want to reiterate this, anything you do with a public house requires planning permission. There are no PD permitted development rights. There are no prior approval procedures for public houses. If your strategy as a property developer or investor is to buy pubs, and let's face it, there are lots of them that have closed. The pandemic has just about seen off a lot of them. But a lot of pubs, the big old city centre ones and that kind of, the big old ones, a lot of them were closing, which is quite sad for some of them. Some of them are actually got a lot of historic and architectural merit. So, but if they're closing down, then, and your strategy is to buy a public house and convert it to flats, convert it to a large HMO, convert it to student accommodation. Just be careful with the last one with student accommodation. It will depend on which council you're in. A lot of councils are now preferring the purpose-built student accommodation, but some councils are quite happy with it. So you just need to know your area and need to know what is going to happen before you go and put that paddle up at the back of the auction house and go, yeah, I'll have that, and then find that you've bought something that you can't actually do anything with, or what you want to do that is going to bring you a profit, because let's face it, that's what all property investors and developers are generally in it for. So public houses, that I've had lots of discussions, shall we say, with people on this. A lot of public houses have landlords accommodation on the upper floor or floors. That means that is not a separate residential use unless it's had planning permission for such. The landlord's accommodation is ancillary to the use of the public house. So it is one planning unit. So a lot of people have said, oh, well, I'm just going to turn it into a couple of flats. And of course, I don't need planning permission for that. And I'm just going to rent them out separately while there's a manager or somebody in the pub below. That's a lot of people have gotten away with this. So a lot of people will tell you that you don't need planning permission for it. That is not the case. Unless it's had planning permission previously, the residential accommodation at the upper floor is for manager or landlord accommodation. The classic, I don't know, the Vic in EastEnders kind of thing. That is where the manager or the landlord lives, and it's one planning unit. So if you wanted to convert any of the upper floors to Airbnb type of use, service accommodation, for example, then because it's in a good location and you're going to get lots of people wanting to come and stay, and it's in a good town, a historic location, something like that, then again, you're going to need planning permission for that. So the conversion of a public house, and there are all sorts of different types of public house in this country, in England. It's going to need planning permission. So you're going to have to get all your ducks in a row, and you are going to have to work out how you're going to split this. Obviously, you'd either use the services of an architect or a planning agent. Other planning consultants are available, I will tell you that now. But my guys who do my drawings, we can split things up and work things out so that the accommodation is the right size to comply with the policies of that particular local council. Some pubs have car parks with them, others don't. Some car parks are large enough that you can actually buy the pub and look at building new additional units on the back of the car park as well. So if that's what you want to do, that's absolutely fine. So you just need planning permission. Don't let anybody tell you that there are permitted development rights for pubs. There are not. Don't let anyone tell you that you can use the prior approval procedure for public houses. You can't. Now, very briefly, I'm just going to fly a red flag. I'm not going to get into this because this could be a whole half hour of video in and of itself, and that is the asset of community value issue. You absolutely must check to see whether any pub that you are looking at has been added, and it's on the council's website, just put on their asset of community value. This came in 2011, 2012. If the community and the villagers or something like that, if the community have got together and they've got wind of the fact that there's a new owner of the pub and it's going to be converted, and you'll see a lot of this where the community have bought a small pub and they've turned it into a community store or a post office or something like that. Those are the positive and successful outcomes. A lot are not as positive nor as successful like that. There's a lot of these tend to be in small villages. There can be a lot of prejudice and a lot of problems in that people just simply don't want to see their local public house go. They don't necessarily frequent it. They just like the idea of a village pub. Now, it's difficult. So if a community have got together, they've formed a committee or a charity or a community group, they can apply to the council, and there has to be reason justification, apply to the council to have the pub added to the list of assets of community value. Now, let me tell you, doesn't necessarily need to be pubs. It can be public toilets, it can be a bandstand, it can be a park, it can be a library, a nursery, it can be all sorts of things that are thought to be for the benefit and in the best interest to be preserved for the benefit of that community or that area. So if the application is successful and the building property is added to the list of assets of community value, that means that there are all sorts of nuances, but you can't really do anything with that for it's around about 5 years. It's on that list for 5 years. Sorry, you can do something with it. But the community, the reason for this is that the community, they don't have first refusal, but they are offered the opportunity within 6 weeks and then 6 months to offer to buy the building in order to convert it. Now, obviously, this needs an awful lot of organisation and management on the part of the community who are doing this, but some people do get themselves organised. So from that point of view, there's a 6-month period within which the community can offer to buy. Now, the asset, the building, will still stay on the asset of community value register for 5 years. At the end of 5 years, it will either come off the list, or it can, the community or the charity or whoever have applied to put it on the list in the first place can renominate and ask for it to be put on again. So it doesn't necessarily prevent you from doing something or changing the use of the pub. However, with the knowledge that there are objections within the village, within the area, within the town, of people who do not want to see this pub go and see it changed, you are going to be fighting an uphill battle if you submit and when you submit your planning application. The fact that it is an asset of community value will not necessarily mean an automatic refusal. However, it will be taken into consideration in determining the application. And if there are objections from the people who want to preserve that pub, then you're going to be having to deal with that, because that will all be put into the mix when the application is determined. And the likelihood is it's going to go to the planning committee, because the likelihood is local members will get involved as well. So, and then there's a whole debate at planning committee, and you know, that's a difficult scenario in and of itself. So, assets of community value. I would urge you, if you are looking, if your strategy is to get pubs and to convert them or do anything with them, make them into a shop, make them into a yoga studio, a creche, any kind of different use, especially converting to residential and to flats, then I would urge you to check and double check and make sure that the asset of community value register that should be available, will be available on the council's website. Make sure this building is not on that. Now, I have heard of an application being submitted and a nomination, an application for an asset of community value going in after that. So just be very careful. Just because it's not on the asset list at the moment doesn't mean to say that it might not be allowed to be put on there during the course of your planning application. So I hope that it would take days to explain all the nuances of asset of community value. What you need to know is red flag. If you're dealing with a pub or any kind of public interest building, you can, you know, if you're your own amusement, you can go on and look at the asset of community value list for your local council. There'll be all sorts of buildings on there. Some are accepted, some are rejected, but they still stay on the list, and it will say what the decision has been. So please, if you're looking at pubs, please make sure that they are not an asset of community value, because that just adds another layer of difficulty in obtaining planning permission if you've got locals who want to preserve and protect that building and keep the use as is for the benefit of the community, arguably. So that's me, Linda Wright. This was episode 3, the week commencing the 16th of January 2023. And this was all about pubs. If you liked what I've talked about, please do a like, share, and subscribe. Let's get this information out there. Let's, you know, stop people getting into all sorts of problems with planning. And I will see you next week and see what has come up next week. I think it might be conditions next week. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for listening to me blather on again, but please do like, subscribe, and share, not necessarily in that order. And I'll see you next time. Thank you.